There's Neapolitan. G sharp minor. I'm going to come back to that in a minute, that D natural. Okay, and so that is variations 2 and 3, and it's going to lead then to variation 4, where we have, it says somewhat slower than the theme. And so, wow, that was a lot of contrast in terms of the tempo and the character. And so this variation 3, tempo changes to allegro vivace, and you have lots of contrast of dynamics. And so we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. But I mentioned this D natural there in box 9, which kind of comes out of the blue. You know, you don't know exactly what that has to do with, and you can't really tell yet. It's going to be more clear when we get to the variation 4 and get to this first ending. And so, actually second ending, sorry, right here at this point. And this, then, you can see the harmony, the D natural is part of this 5-9. So C sharp, E sharp, G sharp, B, and D natural. And so this relates to the place in the theme that is harmonically the beginning of the second half. So at measure 9, it has a B major dominant. It passes through what is a 7 diminished of 2. So that is an E sharp diminished triad. And it doesn't, the theme could have gone and gone to the 2 chord, but he gives you a passing tone in the treble, right there, that B, and then it moves on, and so forth. But it kind of implies a dominant function, secondary dominant function going to a supertonic, to a 2 chord. And so here he explicitly spells it out, that D natural, as then the 9th of that 5-9 chord. Long explanation for it, but that is what this is already anticipating when it gets to the D natural. So when you had in circle 16, the and so forth, that's what that relates to. So it's another permutation of what is implied harmonically in the way that he presents the theme. All right, so in variation 3, a lot of contrast of texture. So you can see how in the first 4 measures, the right hand has eighth notes and eighth rests that are ascending, and it's basically arpeggiating harmonies. And so you have that, let me change this here. This, all right, and the left hand then is going in contrary motion. So it's continuous 16th notes, and you basically, so you basically have that pattern. And so in measure 5 then, the parts are reversed. So here, this is exactly this, and so forth. And the right hand is then put down in the bass, and so those correspond, and so that's an excellent example of invertible counterpoint. So this one is a polyphonic texture, and that double counterpoint is something that he uses phrase by phrase in this particular variation. So that's one other element. So basically it's 2 voices in this variation. He does add, some octaves here in the at the end of the variation, but yeah, it still functions as 2-voice texture. So overall, this is still the same number of phrases, but this is another variation that does not use double bars and repeats. And just like we saw in variation 2, what he does is to write out the repeat. And so this box 1 then is just the same as circle 1, only now he fills out all of the notes here where originally you had skips that were going on. And so this just fills out all the notes, and so it's stepwise scale. And then he reverses the hands, so this is just like this, and so forth. So you still have this double counterpoint texture going on. But one other thing I want to point out is that he is using that falling third idea, and so you can hear in the left hand this. So basically it's so you have falling thirds, and the right hand is the inversion of that. It's that rising third. So that's a motivic element that he's working with. As far as the harmonic structure, it has the same basic cadences, that what you had before. Right here at circle 8 is the place that you're looking for that German 6th chord. And so you remember that the notes are A sharp, C natural, E, and G natural. And so right here, he gives you the A sharp in the bass, he gives you the G natural, he gives you the E, but he doesn't have the C natural, which is a basic element of that augmented 6th chord. Without it, then you don't really have that for sure. And so it's kind of ambiguous where at circle 8, if he has, or if he has, it's a subtle difference, basically it implies it, but at any rate, you don't have the C natural sounding there. In box 8, though, he does move through the C natural, and you have, so it does, the C natural does spell that German 6th chord there. But he does not use the inharmonic spelling in this variation. All right, in the second half, then, we see that we've got repeated notes in the right hand at the beginning. There's a cadence on G sharp minor that we expect right there. But it definitely starts out, you know, the theme has the repeated note. So this is, that's just working with that repeated note idea. And so lots of repeated notes here. He reverses the hands again, and it still is working with the repeated note. Okay, one place where he breaks the pattern of having 4 measures and then inverting those and putting top voice into the bottom and the bottom voice into the top is going to occur right here. So we'd still been going back and forth between, you know, 8th notes and then 16th notes, but here he continues 16th notes in box 9 and 8th notes, and then those change places for the last 4 measures. And so those are the main aspects of variation 3. So basically harmonic structure is the same, phrasing is the same, definitely has the falling third and the repeated note idea. The texture here is in variation 3, 2 voice, polyphonic, so that's definitely contrasts with the theme. Rhythmically, it's obviously much, much faster. This whole variation takes, you know, less than a minute, maybe, I don't know, 45 seconds to play it. And so it really compresses that time element. And this one has lots of contrast. And so obviously the, you know, tempo makes a lot of contrast, but you have just great contrast with, you know, forte versus piano, and then having, you know, sforzandos at the kind of arrival points of the phrases a lot of times. And so those are the main ideas. This one does not use repeat signs. It has it written out. And that is what we find in variation 3. Okay, now when we get to variation 4, Beethoven goes back to using repeat signs. So I already mentioned that he then takes the tempo back to the original, and he says even a little bit slower than the theme. So this one is more sustained. He changes the meter. That was one other thing I didn't point out in this variation, is that he changes from 3/4 to 2/4. So that further compresses the time element. So instead of having 3/4 notes, you only have 2, and now they're at least twice as fast in this variation. So now we're back to 3 pulses per measure. But now it is in a compound time, so we're in 9/8, and so you have that triple kind of, you know, underlying subdivision of the 3 main beats per measure. And when you hear this, what you'll hear is an imitative texture. So again, this is contrapuntal in the first phrase, and so once we get down to, you know, the second part of the, you know, the second phrase of the theme, then it isn't as imitative. But at the beginning, you're going to hear 3 voices, and then you have, you know, an extra voice that's a harmony voice there for a moment. But basically, it's 3 voice texture in this. And you'll hear lots of imitation that's going on back and forth. So it starts out. So that was the first phrase of the theme. So you heard this 16th note idea that is falling by third. So you're going to hear now. So that falling third idea, you know, is going to be something that he sequences and works with in this beginning part of this variation. So this is one that definitely has a return to the lyrical nature of the theme, but the texture for sure contrasts with it. The second phrase then is going to have a crescendo, and it leads up to the high point, and at the first ending there is then a B flat. And so here is another example of the enharmonic spelling of that German sixth chord. So what's going to happen here is that Beethoven's going to write the hands in the lower extremes of the instrument. And so it really gets to, you know, a really wide spaced there at, that would be circle 8. So you have this and right there, yes, the A sharp at the end of that measure, and then on the downbeat of the first ending, he just arpeggiates that C7 chord. Second beat has, so you have this passing through F major right there. And so he does touch on it for just a moment, but then on the third beat he spells it as an A sharp, which then functions and resolves at, you know, this is predominant, so that's a dominant harmony there that goes to B major the way that it was used in the theme. So just for a moment he gives you that inflection there of that surprise harmonically of touching on Neapolitan key. All right, when we get then to the second half, then he changes the texture. And so at this point, what he's going to do is to just alternate. It's basically just harmonic. There's that 5-9 chord in circle 9, and he just gives you the outer. And again, you have that repeated note. You know, it's very expressive with that chromaticism. And then so he just moves that C9 down to a 5-9, you know, a B ninth chord. And then, and so that's tonic. And now he's going to prepare this cadence on G sharp minor that's going to occur right there where you expected in circle 12, so the end of the third phrase. And so now here it is an F double sharp, fully diminished 7th chord. And again, he keeps alternating, you know, with the repeated. You have an accent there. And now he gives you sforzandos. And it goes to G sharp minor. Changes to E major right there at the end of circle 12. That's the end of the third phrase. And then this is the place in the theme that went so what happens is he has that F sharp minor harmony, so that 2 chord, and now it's a, you know, 2-7 because you have the E, and that's back to the texture or the melodic shape that you had at the beginning of so he brings back the original melody from the beginning of the variation. And he is just going to bring this to a beautiful conclusion, and ends with that very, you know, mystical kind of quality. So let's listen to Barenboim play this variation. And then again, what I'm going to do is to play variation 4 and variation 5. You can get a feel for the contrast between